Your wealth should also benefit us. Just because you've succeeded doesn't mean you can forget your duties to the family, Mandy. My mother's words sliced through the quiet elegance of the five-star hotel like a knife. My father nodded in satisfaction, and my sister Kristen briefly lifted her eyes from her phone as if to say, well, of course. At that luxurious Christmas dinner table, I sat under the gaze of predators circling their prey. How did it come to this? It had all begun with an email I received a few weeks earlier. That day, I had just closed a major deal at my New York office. As I looked out over the skyline of glittering skyscrapers, I felt proud of what I had built with my own hands. Then, my phone chimed. The sender, my mother. Subject line, Family Christmas Celebration Dinner. Honestly, I was confused. Since I'd left home, I'd had little to no real contact with my family. No matter what awards I'd earned as a student, my parents had shown almost no reaction. Handle your own affairs, my father had said before hanging up, when at the start of my business, I'd called in desperation for advice. After that, I never asked them for anything again. So why now? The email read, Dear Mandy, to celebrate your wonderful success, we've booked the finest place for our Christmas dinner this year. We want to share our pride in you as a family. Kristen is eager to see you too. Doubt swirled in my mind, but I couldn't deny the tiny spark of hope flickering inside me. Maybe, without me realizing it, my parents had changed, even if only a little. Perhaps this dinner could become a new beginning, one that might finally thaw the frost that had long frozen our family. I decided to take a chance on that fragile hope. I simply replied, I'll be there. I was unaware that I was accepting an invitation to a carefully laid trap. On Christmas Day, when I arrived at the hotel restaurant at the appointed time, my family was already there. My father wore a tailored suit. My mother was dripping with ostentatious jewelry. Kristen, absurdly out of place in that elegant setting, was busy taking selfies. Mandy, we've been waiting for you. My mother rushed over and pulled me into a tight embrace. I wrinkled my brow slightly at the overpowering scent of her perfume. My father folded his arms with satisfaction. The pride of the Hanson family. I made sure we got the best table for you. His tone implied that he was the one paying for everything. Behind his words, I could clearly sense the arrogance that said, You owe your success to me. As soon as we sat down, the flood of praise began. I read that article, The Consultant Leading the Next Generation. Do you know how proud I am to tell people I'm your mother? My mother gushed. You're proof that my parenting methods were right all along, my father said smugly, raising his wine glass. Wow, Mandy, what brand is that bag? Lend it to me sometime, Kristen added, finally glancing up from her phone. But only to inspect my accessories. I kept my polite smile. I could see right through their words. Compliments wrapped around thinly veiled expectations. The faint hope I'd carried was already collapsing into disappointment within minutes. Still, I remained composed. Even as the seafood platter arrived, their disguised probing continued. My mother asked vulgar questions. That watch must cost as much as a house, right? My father tried to connect everything to his business. Surely some of your clients could be useful to our firm. Even with the finest lobster before them, their interest wasn't in the food. It was in my assets, my value, and how much of it they could extract. I knew exactly what answer they were waiting for. The unspoken message in their words was clear. We're celebrating your success so generously. Shouldn't you offer some support in return? But I didn't take the bait. I smiled, kept my responses neutral, and sipped my wine in measured pauses, as if playing chess, anticipating their next move. When they realized I wasn't loosening my purse strings, impatience and irritation began to show. The main course arrived, a perfectly cooked masterpiece, but no one at the table cared anymore. My father frowned, stabbing his knife into the meat harder than necessary. My mother sighed dramatically, glancing sideways at me in silent reproach. As for Kristen, she had already given up on eating, idly poking at her plate with her fork while casting impatient, urging glances at our father, as if to say, Hurry up. Their behavior was so predictably clumsy, it was almost comical. By the time dessert was finished, my father cleared his throat and finally got to the point. Mandy, those who succeed have a social responsibility, especially toward their family. Your success no longer belongs to you alone. At that cue, Kristen leaned forward eagerly, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Exactly. So, I wanted to ask you something. I'm planning to move out next year, and I'd really love a nice apartment in Manhattan. With your income, the rent wouldn't be much of a burden, right? It was a shameless demand, thinly veiled in false innocence. And she wasn't done. Oh, and about my influencer work. I think it would totally blow up if I had your business expertise behind me. You could help me out, right? Of course, since we're family, I was hoping you'd do it for free. I drew a sharp breath, but before I could respond, my mother struck again. Your wealth should also benefit us. Just because you've succeeded doesn't mean you can forget your duties to the family, Mandy. At the now silent table, I slowly set down my napkin. Anger burned behind my calm exterior, but my voice remained perfectly steady. The control honed from years of negotiation, holding my emotions in check. First, I turned to Kristen, who was watching me with a bright, expectant smile. Kristen, I wonder where that confidence of yours comes from. If you want to succeed as an influencer, maybe you should focus on building your own content instead of depending on someone else's wealth. Or perhaps the kind of content you're thinking of is a guide called How to Leech Off Your Successful Sister. What? Kristen's face flushed crimson. Leeching off? That's awful. Next, I faced my father. Dad, responsibility to the family, you say? When I was sitting alone in a tiny apartment without an office, working day and night in front of a computer, where exactly was that responsibility of yours? The one time I called for help desperately, you said, handle it yourself. If my memory serves me right. My father's mouth twitched. He looked away, awkward and cornered. I only said that for your own good. Finally, I turned to my mother, who was wearing the face of a tragic heroine. And you, Mom, how can you say something like share your wealth? My success was built on loneliness, relentless effort, and countless failures. My blood, my sweat, and my tears. Why should I hand over the product of that pain to feed your vanity and laziness? My words were quiet, but they cut deep. I could feel other diners glancing our way, but I no longer cared. That's enough. My father slammed the table lightly. Mandy, success has changed you. How ungrateful you've become. Ungrateful? Tell me, for what exactly am I supposed to be grateful? I asked softly. For raising you, of course. For providing for you, he barked, his voice rising. What you call a gratitude, Dad, is actually a parent's legal duty to raise and educate their child. It's not an investment that earns repayment with interest. His lips trembled as if to reply, but no words came. The silence between us grew so heavy that even the distant hum of the restaurant seemed muffled. Then, as if to drop the curtain on this farce, a waiter quietly placed the bill on the table. My father looked at it, then began patting his pockets with exaggerated confusion. Oops, I seem to have left my card in another jacket. That seemed to trigger them, and both my mother and Kristen chimed in as if on cue. Oh, how dreadful. I think I left my wallet at home too. Oops, sorry, Mandy. I maxed out my card this month. All three pairs of eyes turned toward me. Ah, of course. This was the real purpose of tonight's dinner. To make me pay for their vanity, their greed, and to trap me beneath the weight of guilt and obligation. But they didn't know. I hadn't come here unprepared. As their excuses flew across the table, I reached calmly into my handbag. I caught the flicker of relief on my father's face, the look of a man who believes his plan has succeeded. My mother's eyes were already drifting dreamily toward the window, perhaps thinking of what she'd buy next. Kristen picked up her phone as if to say, I'm done here. They were certain they'd won. I slowly pulled out a small coin purse, not the sleek black card wallet they expected. From it, I took a single coin and placed it on the table with a faint clink. A dull copper coin. A single penny. Their eyes locked onto it. My father's brows furrowed, my mother's mouth fell open, and Kristen let out a bewildered, huh? I smiled calmly, met each of their eyes in turn, and said clearly, this is all I'm paying for. 1 cent. More than enough for what you've given me. There was silence for the next few heartbeats. Then my father's face turned crimson with rage. Mandy, how dare you insult us like this? Insult? I replied coolly. No, I'm simply stating a fact. This coin represents the exact value of what you've given me. Enough of this nonsense. He pushed his chair back and was about to stand when I quietly raised my hand toward the restaurant's entrance. A man in a dark suit, carrying a briefcase, walked toward us with deliberate, unhurried steps. "Who are you?" my father demanded. The man gave me a polite nod, then took several documents from his case and laid them before my father. "Mr. Hansen, my name is Victor, an attorney representing Miss Mandy Hansen. I must inform you that tonight's conversation has been fully documented as a coordinated attempt at financial coercion and psychological intimidation. Victor is my company's legal counsel." He placed a small voice recorder on the table, and the air froze instantly. My mother's face went pale. Kristen nearly dropped her phone. Then Victor slid one final document into the center of the table. "And this is a restraining order issued by the court against all members of the Hansen family, prohibiting contact with Miss Mandy." Restraining order. The words hit them like a spell. My once arrogant father was struck dumb. My mother covered her trembling mouth with one hand. Kristen just stared between Victor and me, her face drained of color. I could almost see their thoughts racing. About reputation, about the neighbors, about the scandal this would cause among the so-called local elite. The unruffled Victor, "Any violation of this order will result in immediate legal action. You may contest it in court, but given the audio evidence from tonight, that would not be advisable." I stood up slowly. I slipped my handbag over my shoulder, smoothed a crease from my dress, and turned away from the stunned faces of my family. Without a single word, I walked out of the restaurant. Outside, the December air bit at my skin, cold, clean, liberating. The noise of New York surrounded me, bright and alive, like a fanfare celebrating my freedom. I drew in a long breath. For the first time in years, I felt the heavy chains around my heart fall away. But as expected, their retaliation began the very next day. They couldn't contact me directly. The restraining order forbade it. So they chose another battleground: social media. My mother posted a heavily filtered selfie on Facebook, her caption dripping with passive aggression. "There is no pain greater than being betrayed by the daughter you raised with love. Success can make people so cold." The comments flooded in. "So sorry for you. How heartbreaking. She'll regret it someday." My father wrote in a private online forum for local business leaders. "Parenting is difficult. We tried to teach our daughter independence, but perhaps we went too far. She seems to have forgotten what family means." But the worst offender was Kristen. She posted a video to her Instagram story, her face swollen from crying, and acted as if she were the tragic heroine. My beloved sister misunderstood me, but I believe that one day she'll understand. They were desperate to portray me as a cold-hearted villain who had abandoned my family in pursuit of success. But once again, they underestimated me. For several days, I watched their little theater unfold in silence. A few friends and colleagues messaged to ask if I was okay. I replied simply, "I'm fine." No arguments and no explanations. I let the storm burn itself out. My silence only fueled their false narrative, emboldening them, making them louder, more dramatic, more reckless. And then the time came. I contacted Victor and set the second stage of my plan in motion. It took the form of an article, but not one written by me. I commissioned one of the most influential online business magazines in the country. The title read, "Exploitation in the Name of Family: The Hidden Enemy Every Successful Person Faces." It was written as the anonymous confession of a successful woman. Every detail, every incident, every piece of evidence I'd provided through Victor was laid out, calmly, meticulously, without embellishment. Copies of the emails where they'd refused me help, records of their repeated financial demands, and of course, the full transcript of that Christmas dinner, the one captured on audio. The article also included commentary from experts on financial abuse and narcissistic parenting. It wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a carefully framed exposé, positioning the issue as a broader social problem faced by many successful individuals. The moment the article went live, it exploded. This feels like my own story. So, this is what people mean when they say your relatives multiply after you succeed. Because we're family. The most toxic phrase in the language. The comment section swirled with empathy, outrage, and reflection. My name appeared nowhere. But anyone who had seen my family's previous posts could easily connect the dots. Within hours, the tone in my mother's Facebook comments began to shift. "Are you sure your daughter's the only one at fault here?" After reading that article, I see things differently. My father's online circle fell silent. And Kristen's inbox was probably flooded with messages like, "Wait, is that article about your family?" The fragile facade they'd built, the image of the poor, misunderstood family, began to crumble with a single article. They were being undone on the very battlefield they had chosen. It was poetic justice. A week after the article's publication, the once noisy accounts of my family had gone dead silent. My mother, my father, and Kristen had deleted every post, retreating completely. For people who prized reputation above all else, to be exposed online as the archetype of a parasitic family must have been unbearable humiliation. For me, peace had finally come. I focused on my work again, spending quiet evenings with friends I could trust. I will no longer let my family's unreasonable demands disturb my peace of mind. From my office, high above the city, behind walls of soundproof glass, I was completely insulated from their noise. Then, one afternoon, Victor called. "Mandy, your father reached out." I stiffened slightly. "He violated the restraining order?" "No, he asked me, as your representative, to arrange a meeting. Apparently, their company's in serious trouble." He explained that the regional firm my father had once ruled as a local magnate was collapsing, unable to keep up with the changing times. A risky investment had gone spectacularly wrong. They were drowning in debt, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Victor's voice remained steady. "I assume he plans to ask for financial assistance. You're under no obligation to meet him, of course. I'll decline on your behalf if you wish." I turned toward the window, watching the skyline blur into thought. I could almost picture my father's defeated face. It would be easy to ignore him. After all they'd done to me, I had every right to let them fall. They had earned their ruin. But if I simply walked away now, nothing would change. They'd just find someone else to lean on, to drain, and the cycle would repeat. That wouldn't be the real solution I wanted. What I wanted was not revenge. It was closure. And to get that closure, I had to sit at the final negotiating table. "Victor, set up a meeting," I said decisively, "but it will be at my office, and the negotiations will be led 100% by me. This is not an act of sentimental mercy. This is my business." The final consultation with my most troublesome clients, my own family, was about to begin. A few days later, my father, mother, and Kristen appeared in the reception room of my office. They looked nothing like the people I'd seen at that Christmas dinner. Exhausted, diminished, almost fragile. My father's once proud suit looked worn and faded. My mother's gaudy jewelry was gone. And Kristen, for once, didn't have her phone in hand, her eyes fixed on the floor. Beyond the glass walls, my team worked efficiently, their voices a faint hum in the background. The people who had once tried to control me now stood in my office, waiting for my permission to speak. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mandy," my father's voice cracked as he spoke. "We need your help." His trembling hands placed a folder on the table. A thick stack of documents lay before me, page after page of numbers bathed in red ink. It was a record of their collapse. My father began to speak, the words spilling out like a broken dam. A failed investment, a final notice from the bank, the looming threat of foreclosure. It was a pitiful confession, one that stripped him of every last shred of pride as a businessman. Beside him, my mother sat in silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. Kristen bit her nails until they bled. I listened without interrupting, and as he spoke, old memories rose unbidden from the depths of my mind. It was the day of my college graduation. I was the valedictorian. I remembered running to my parents, my diploma clutched proudly in hand. My father's first words were, "So you can finally be of use to the family." Not, "Congratulations." My mother had simply said, "I need to help Kristen pick out her dress." Barely even looking at me. When I launched my own company, it was the same. After countless sleepless nights of planning, the day I signed the lease on my first office, I had called my mother in excitement. She sighed and said, "Instead of walking such a dangerous path, why don't you just find a good man and settle down?" Not once had they ever looked at my ambitions or dreams and seen them for what they were. To them, I had only ever been a reflection in the mirror of their narrow values. "Please, Mandy." My father pleaded with me. "I'm begging you, help us." I finally spoke. "Help you?" "Yes, I can help, but not for free." I glanced toward Victor. He slid a prepared contract across the table. What is this? These are the terms under which I'm willing to save you. I stood and moved toward the glass wall, gazing out at the skyline of New York. Then I turned back to face them. And, in a way, to face my past self. I'm not just offering money, I'm offering a new kind of relationship. They stared at the contract, stunned. I began to read the terms aloud one by one. My voice rang clear in the silence of the office. Article 1. The funds I provide will be considered a loan. Repayment terms will be determined in consultation with a financial planner of my choosing. This is not charity. It's business. My father looked up, but no words came. Article 2. Partial management rights will be transferred to a representative I appoint. Your reckless system must be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. That is the natural right of any investor seeking to protect their capital. My father's lips quivered. He knew what it meant. That the castle he'd built and rotted from within would now bear my flag. Article 3. You are strictly forbidden to use or mention my name, my company, or any details of my private life, on social media or elsewhere, without written permission. You will never again use me as a prop for your pride. My mother gasped. It was the moment I took away one of her favorite forms of validation. Article 4. All future financial matters or requests must be submitted in writing through my attorney, Victor. No emotional phone calls, no surprise visits. From this moment on, we will not act as a family bound by emotion, but as partners bound by a contract. Kristen finally raised her head, glaring at me. This is like treating us as strangers. Yes, that's right, I replied immediately. Because you've treated me worse than you would a stranger. So let's start from there. A clean slate as business partners governed by rules. And then came the final clause. Article 5. If you violate any part of this agreement, the loan is immediately revoked. Full management control transfers to me, and our relationship, personal and professional, is permanently severed. There will be no second chances. I pushed the contract toward them. Whether you sign or not is your choice. They looked at one another, speechless. The so-called family bond that had once bound me like a chain now held no power at all. Only the cold logic of business remained. So, ironically, that was also the only thing that could save them now. My father picked up the pen with trembling hands. He was no longer the respected patriarch or the local magnate, just a defeated man. My father signed and my mother followed. Kristen glared one last time, then, urged by my father, scribbled her name as well. The contract was complete. It was perhaps the most important one of my entire life. The long battle was finally over. 6 months later, my father's company was slowly rebuilding under the guidance of the professional team I'd assigned. He stepped down from management and now serves quietly as an advisor. My mother's social media account, once filled with showy posts, now features only photos of her garden. Kristen rented a small apartment on her own and is working part-time while trying to become an influencer. She never mentions my name again. All communication still goes through Victor. Once a month, I receive a report on the company's recovery, and nothing more. I finally have the peace I had always wanted. Steady, unemotional, and quiet. I haven't saved my family, nor have I punished them. I have simply reconstructed them. Rather than mourn what was broken, I have rebuilt it under new rules. We often excuse cruelty with the phrase, because we're family. But I've learned something. True family isn't built on endless tolerance. It's built on mutual respect. And when that foundation doesn't exist, you have to build it yourself.